Hello, so tritone substitutions are pretty well known, I think it's safe to say. I think the simplest way of using it, which is to take something like D minor 7, G7, C major, 7th, and turn it into, turn that G7 into a D flat 7, is a pretty good way of using it actually. So, for instance, I might come up with a line like this, or those things sound good because there's a clear outlining of the harmony and that sort of way of playing. That's a hip sound, right? That kind of D flat major against G kind of creates a nice tension which can then easily be resolved into the next chord. Yeah? Yeah. And really in a sense you're coming semitone above to play the C major. And the 7th acts as a really good enclosure of the root of the target chord, which is how I used it there. So it's good to be obvious, because obvious sounds good. Obvious and clear often sounds best when using harmonic substitutions. However, there's a few other things we can do which are really nice. And to understand this, you'll need to understand the basic concept which I have, which is something I've stolen from Cheryl Bailey. It's called the Family of Four. Cheryl Bailey's a great bebop guitar player and educator. I think she's based in Boston, and I think she's based in New York, I think, and she teaches at Berkeley, amongst other things. She's a great player, student of Emily Remler, amongst other people. And her approach is based, or this Family of Four approach is based on taking the chord tones of a G7, which there are 4, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, right? 1, 3, 5, flat 7, and taking those and turning into arpeggios in the G7 or G Mixolydian scale. So this is not a million miles away from Barry Harris's stuff. It's not quite the same thing, but it dovetails very nicely because it uses the same sounds, and Barry Harris has similar, although not exactly the same concepts in his teaching. So I really like it anyway. It's a great way into creating some fun bebop lines and substitutions. And basically you have the first one, which is G7, built on the root, then B minor 7 flat 5, D half diminished, which is built on the 3rd, D minor 7th, built on the D, on the 5th, and then F major built on the flat 7, right? So so you got like the four different chords, and that's called the Family of Four. Now that's really nice because very much like Barry Harris's teaching, it kind of consolidates this thing, the 2-5, into one object, which is super useful for playing bebop, because if you kind of think 2-5, 2-5, 2-5, 2-5, you can end up playing like this kind of stuff all the time. You know, which sounds a bit, you know, it's just too much information. So often, like in bebop lines, you'll find like they've cherry-picked 1 or 2 chords from this Family of Four and arpeggiated them and put in sort of enclosures and passing tones and all the rest of it. It's not the only thing that shows up. Like Barry Harris students will tell you that any arpeggio of G Mixolydian can be used as part of a line on the G7, right? But this is a really good entry point, and I really like using it to teach people how to construct bebop lines. So just to give you a sort of idea of the kind of thing I might get up to with that, for instance, I might play. So that I'm just gonna, trying to do it the simplest way possible. Might be better, rhythmically better that way. This is just a D minor 7 arpeggio, the 5th, going to the 3rd of a B minor 7 flat 5, and then resolving down to the 5th of the C major. But I can complicate that a little bit. I go. Yeah. I can change, add in notes, enclosures, extra things, change the rhythm, that kind of stuff. Or miss out the first arpeggio entirely. Now, that is kind of, could be understood as being a D minor 7, B9, C major. It's not how I'm thinking of it, but you could analyse it that way. It gets kind of, sometimes when 2-5s are fast, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, for instance, like there's two beats per chord, often that's a bit too much information. But you shouldn't feel like you can't use things like the F major to play like a little 2-5-1. Now, you might, if you're, I don't know, chord scale theory person or something, you might choose to analyze each of those notes over each chord, and you'll probably find some stuff. But that's not how I'm thinking of it. I'm just thinking F major 7th going into C major. Into the seventh can make that more complicated. You know, or you know, that's a classic Charlie Parker line, and so on and so forth. But that still based in F major 7th, with that kind of nice little slightly mocking resolution into the ninth of the C major. I always hear those things like that. I don't know why. Maybe I just had a bad time at school. Anyway, I hear that kind of teasing sort of sardonic aspect to Bebop Lines, and I really like it. What can I say? Okay, so that sort of thing is great, you know, and you can come up with great lines that way. But where it gets like kind of more interesting harmonically is where we can use a tritone substitution and come up with a fresh family of 4. Now the one big one I want to point out is, I'm just going to whiz through them. So there's D flat 7, there's F minor 7 flat 5, or F half diminished, and then there's A flat minor 7th, and then there's my favourite, B major 7th. Oof, weird. Okay, yeah. So I mean, imagine putting that over G7. It's the most dissonant chord you think of, but if it resolves, it sounds good, right? So I mean, that is a whole sort of realm of kind of possibilities. I would like to point to like the kind of most obvious thing, which is that the F major 7th and the F minor 7 flat 5 both share a root, right? And because of that, you know, they're both built on the 7th. With that G7, you can go something very nice about it. Or you know, you can kind of construct instantly beboppy sounding lines. You know, or and this movement here, it's full of bebop potential, and I mean that's a really nice arpeggio to play because it contains the important notes of the G7 and D flat 7, which are these two here, the tritone, which makes the tritone sub possible, and that's the B and the F in this key. And if you look at the A flat the F minor 7 flat 5 chord, it has both those notes in. So right away, it's kind of really good. And it's almost obvious, right? It's, you know, and it is obvious, you know. That kind of thing. Very kind of like, just sounds beboppy to me right away. So definitely play around with that. Obviously, I've already talked about the D flat 7. Things get a little wilder if you use the other two subs. So the A flat minor 7th and the B major 7th, and these are both totally hip sounds, you know, but they are conventionally wrong because of the F sharp on the G major chord, or the G7 chord, sorry, which is the major 7th against the 7th. There's a lot of reason to believe that bebop players didn't really give a crap about these sorts of things, and actually you can make them work really well as lines. If I play like D minor 7, obviously, then B major 7th. Let's do that again properly. So that thing. Oh, I mean, it sets up on a nasty tension. But you can diffuse it just by resolving it in the right way. So the way I did it was quite a nice way of doing it. Change the rhythm slightly again. You know, this. So that becomes, for instance, you can hear a, sorry, out of tune chord there, but you can hear a relationship between that setup chord and the target chord, and that's the important thing. You know, same with like the A flat minor 7th. Also has that note in. So I mean, it might be a good idea to play the G in your resolution. Doesn't have to be right away. The ear has a way of linking the top notes of your arpeggios and whatnot into being voice leading. So you don't hear, you know, all the notes just in a row. You will hear like this kind of thing going on, you know, or you'll hear that voice leading in the top line or whatever, depending on what line you're playing. So don't feel like you have to resolve every weird note right away. You can resolve it later on in the line. And the more you do this, the more confidence you'll get dealing with that dissonance. Yeah, so that gives us another tritone relationship, which is the B minor 7 flat 5 on the G7. Really common sound, by the way, especially like swing music and stuff like that. If you get that sound, then you can also swap it out for a major 7th, which is like the opposite of swapping an F major 7th for the F minor 7 flat 5, which is quite a nice little symmetry. So you go, instead of going like, let me see, yeah, so instead of going, okay, so going like, you kind of go, that's pretty hip, I think. I mean, play around with that. So I'm playing like B minor 7 flat 5 into B major 7th into C major. You would never think of doing that, I don't think, if you were coming from a chord scale angle, but just because that chord is raised to the tritone, it's a 7th. You know, it still creates beautiful kind of smooth voice leading if you use it in the right way. You know, there's no reason why you shouldn't use those sounds, just because some bloke in a book says so. So, you know, Barry Harris sort of talks about the F sharp being a feature of those kinds of resolutions, and I agree. It's a nice sound. When you get used to using it, then it's great, because all 12 notes of the scale are just your
playthings to use as you wish, minions in your grand scheme.
The last thing, by the way, is that you can turn any of, apart from really the one, any of those can turn into a diminished 7th. So, for instance, if I'm playing an F major 7th going into C major, play like a diminished connection into it. That's really an obvious thing in a way, but it's worth mentioning. Sorry, I went a bit more tritone there. But if I go, I'm playing there, which is an inversion, I guess, of yeah, I suppose what I'm doing there is playing D flat 6, so you get that classic like bebop cadence, which you hear a lot. I mentioned it in my Green Dolphin Street video. Get up, Mom. And oh, by the way, you can also take that A flat 6th, A flat minor 6th, and turn it into a melodic minor scale to get that altered sound, right? If you choose to, you don't have to use the F sharp either. You can raise that to a G, and then you get like, perhaps for most people who are raised on chord scale theory, slightly more conventional choices. So the A minor major 7th. So I can go D minor 7th, which works really nicely, or the B major 7th but with a raised 5th, so this thing. Thanks for watching. I hope that's interesting to you. Bye.